Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 6th episode of Birddogs, Bourbon, and the Good Life. Today, our guest is David Becker. He is an engineer, an entrepreneur. He owns his own hobby business, and the name of his hobby business is Becker's Expensive Hobbies. Sorry. In that business, he makes custom woodworking, some like you've never seen. And also, he is an FFL. So, David, how are you doing this evening?
Doing just fine. Thanks for having me, Steve.
You're welcome. We're looking forward to the conversation. I know it's going to be interesting, and I know it's going to be a good time. Before we dive into David too much here, as you can tell, we had to do a promo for Pheasants Forever before we started, and our bourbon, I'm kind of hiding the name from you for a minute, is down just a touch. Compared to where we normally start. And our bourbon this evening, I can't even say without laughing, chicken cock. Sorry. Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It has a pretty interesting little story on the back of it. Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, one of the oldest bourbon brands in the United States. Chicken Cock was established in 1856 in Paris, Bourbon County, Kentucky. 7 decades after, it was a staple in the prohibition in speakeasies, including the world-famous Cotton Club, known as the famous Old Brand. Chicken Cock died off after World War II, but has now returned to its rightful place in the pantheon of great American heritage whiskeys. So I'm going to say this. It's a lot better than last week. But at the same time, it's a much lighter bourbon. I'm personally into a much heavier bourbon. I like to be able to taste the char. I like to be able to taste a stronger caramel note to it. And overall, it's a good bourbon if you like a lighter flavor bourbon. What do you think, David?
I have to agree with you a little bit, Steve. I got the opportunity to smell with bourbon that you guys had last week. I started to say whiskey there because I couldn't really necessarily tell that was a bourbon.
Yeah.
Big difference in this one compared to that one is it does have the aromatics to it. It has the smells that you would think, and before either of us took a sip of it, I think we had a lot different expectations than what we ended up getting out of the flavor.
Yeah, the flavor just isn't.
I think kind of like you said, expect to kind of taste the barrel. It's something that you're expecting out of a bourbon, and this to me just was more of a spice flavor than the barrel flavor or that smoke flavor. So it's not something that I mind, but is it my favorite bourbon? Probably not.
Yeah, it's definitely not one of my favorite bourbons either. But it's not bad. Just like the other one, I'm pretty sure there's someone out there that thinks this is the cream of the crop, and I got this today because I laughed when I read it. And David and I have kind of a little bit of a good humor amongst ourselves, and the name Chicken Cock just makes me crack up. So we tried it. The guy at the liquor store said there's a lot of people that just love this. It's just not quite bold enough for me personally. But like David said, you can't really taste the barrel very well. Ultimately, it's not a bad bourbon. I'm just a little too picky, and like again, David said, when we smelt it, we had a different expectation than how it actually turned out when we started tasting it. So again, we're drinking Chicken Cock tonight. Through the night, I'm pretty sure if we decide to expound on how we feel about it later in the show, we will again. But we're going to go right into talking about David and what he's done, what has guided him into becoming an entrepreneur. I know David is my opinion, a young man still. And he has a beautiful young family, nice wife, 2 kids, and how he finds the time to be able to work on his entrepreneuring spirit through his hobbies, as well as do his full-time 9 to 5 job, which is more like a 12, 15-hour day in most cases, as an engineer. So, David, tell us a little bit about your entrepreneur and how you got into wanting to do the side job as an entrepreneur and making that little bit of side cash through the side.
Sure. Gonna have to say that all started because I got married. So when my wife and I got married, or before we got married, going through, like most people, their wedding registries and trying to put things in, figure out what they're going to do for filling up their homes. We started looking at some of the furniture and consolidating the things that we had to the things that we still needed. And you start looking at price tags on a lot of things. I was seeing higher price tags on a lot of items than what I thought it should be. When I grew up, my grandfather was a woodworker. My dad was an electrician. We all grew up working with our hands. Funniest thing is, when I was growing up, I could have cared less about being in the wood shop with my grandfather while he was teaching me things. I would much rather been out playing sports or fishing or hunting, doing almost anything other than being in the wood shop. But through 4-H, I kind of got forced into spending some time out there because I was in woodworking for 4-H. So I learned a lot of the skills at a young age, probably starting about age 7 or 8 was probably my first woodworking project for 4-H. Did that all the way through high school. So I learned a lot of things, even though at the time wasn't maybe what I wanted to be doing. So coming back again to when my wife and I were registering for things, started looking at the prices of furniture and go, I know how to do those things, and I think that I could save enough money on buying tools and the materials and making those myself that I could get something similar and have tools left at the end of it. So that kind of started me down a rabbit hole of purchasing my own things again and building up a shop. And after I'd made a couple of things for our house, I had people that were interested in what I had done. And I'm the kind of person that can't just do something. I have to take it to the next level.
So the one thing, I know David a little bit. So I'm going to pick on him a little bit here. So ultimately, what he's telling you is his wife wanted new furniture and he wanted new tools. And he found a way to get the furniture and the tools at the same time. Remember this, guys. If you want new stuff, do something for your wife and say, I got to have this tool to do it. No, I'm funning with David a little bit. But at the same time, we also know you're an engineer. And engineers historically are a little bit picky. And a little bit, I like to use the word anal, but that's not a politically correct phrase, I'm sure. But what I mean by that is super, super, super detailed. And the work you've done that I've seen is amazing. One of the things you were talking about in your promo for Pheasants Forever is handmade dovetails. So I'm assuming they got a tool to do that, don't they?
There are quite a few different tools out there that you can do it with.
But instead of getting a tool to do it, you're so focused on detail that you would prefer to ensure that they're made flawlessly by you making them by hand. Is that correct?
Well, funny thing about that is that's not necessarily the case.
Really?
So a machine can make something that fits tight every time, great fit. You're going to get all the qualities that you're ever going to want out of that dovetail, the holding of it, the kind of the look. That's where it falls apart for most people. Traditional furniture and furniture that was made by hand, specifically in the older times, compared to newer stuff, you can tell instantly. And it has a different draw to it for different people. Some people couldn't care less, but they pull a drawer open, you can instantly tell if those dovetails or the way that drawer was made by hand, or if that drawer was made by a machine.
So what you're saying is you're wanting to give it that personal feel. That I want to use antique look, but it's really not an antique look. But you want to make sure that people understand you really did take the time and the effort and the focus on making a handcrafted piece of furniture that will last them forever. And then they can also see and theoretically feel the passion that you had when you built their furniture.
That's correct. And that's the big difference is for some people, it doesn't matter. They don't care. And that's a place where you can try and cut costs for somebody. Say you've got a custom project. There's ways that you can take something out and try and help them out making a budget. You've also got the other people that want something that they know is had a lot of attention to detail put into it. It's had the work of a craftsman the entire way through the project, and that has a certain value to them that's more than just the cost of the piece. And that's where you really get into something that inspires a woodworker or a craftsman of any kind, is being able to go and put those touches into something. They're actually putting a little more heart and effort into those pieces because they're getting to put some of their creativity into it. So it's something that gets you excited to do it, as opposed to, if I've got to do a whole bunch of drawers, maybe I'll get out the jig and I'll do the router on them. Because doing a drawer, like you said, I have 2 small kids and a wife, so I've got other things that I'm doing other than just building furniture. So if I'm doing something by hand, I might be able to do 1 drawer a night to actually cut it by hand, as opposed to if I'm just trying to make quite a few of them, I might be able to knock out a dresser worth of drawers in a night if I set up a jig for it.
Yeah.
So there's just a different time requirement and effort that's going into each one of those pieces. Is there something that changes about the way that it functions? Not really. You're going to get something high quality either way. You just have something that you know had that effort and that attention to detail from the craftsman, as opposed to something getting closer to your big
mass
box
production.
store. Yeah, you're mass producing something that's just set up and run. You can get that out of furniture or something anywhere because it's just a setup. But if you really want something that's custom, that's where you get the little details, like the hand-cut dovetails on something as opposed to a machine cut.
Yeah. And so when we talk about this and we think about this a little bit, when I think about your business and the attention to detail that you do and how you're willing to work with the customer, and how you're wanting to focus on what is this customer expecting. So a lot of the time you'll hear the phrase heritage furniture, okay? A lot of people will come down here to Yoder, Kansas and buy heritage handmade furniture. And basically what they're doing is they're paying this premium cost for handmade furniture that is kind of mass-produced. I'm not going to say what they're doing isn't handmade. I'm just saying it's kind of mass-produced. So what your business does is, if, let's say, my wife comes to you and says, hey, I want a end table. I'm just picking something. And I would really like it to have the heritage feel to it, the heritage handmade, hand-detailed feel to it. Then you can really put that into it, and you can make it per a design that she kind of picks out, because you're an engineer. You have the ability to give her kind of a visual of it before you ever make it. And compared to going down to some of these other heritage places that make it, and they're like, well, here's our heritage end table, but they're probably not going to make it custom for you. A lot of these places, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of these places won't make it custom for you. So you are really providing a rare service. Now, I'm sure there's other people out there that do this, but you're providing a rare service that on the truly custom, the engineer mindset, the ability to pre-design and kind of show them before you ever cut a piece of wood. Is that all a right assumption on my part?
That is right. The big thing that you got to keep in mind is in today's world, we've kind of become accustomed to things that are mass produced. Part of that is becoming accustomed to the price of something that's mass produced.
Yeah.
And so as we look for something to add into our homes, a lot of us are looking for that blend between budget and something that's of quality, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you get into, like what you're talking about, maybe coming down here to Yoder and going down and looking at some of the stuff that they've got. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of handwork compared to some of the more commercially mass-produced, but at the end of the day, they have to set it up and run it through at a larger scale than what we're talking about here. If you wanted to go get something that was actually like handmade for you, custom from somewhere, you'd be looking at a very different price even than what you're going and looking at those showrooms for what most people would consider as a custom or handmade piece.
So one of the things that I'm going to point out is I think you're underselling yourself a little bit. And I'm going to stress to the people that are listening and watching the video that when you made the cabinet for Pheasants Forever, you guys don't know about the cabinet yet. We'll get there. So you made a handmade cabinet for Pheasants Forever. And we were talking about the hinges and all this stuff. And I'm just a stupid redneck. And I'm like, yeah, let's go down to the hardware store, get a hinge, screw it on, right? And you show me these hinges. And I believe I know the cost of them. If I'm a little off, let me know. If I'm close, let me know. So these hinges were really expensive in my mind. They were thinking they were either $25 or $30 a piece or something like that. But they were.
You're a little off there.
Yeah. How much were they?
So the hinges on that cabinet run, I think the small ones ran $65 a pair for two of them, and the larger, heavier duty hinges on those run about $75 to $85 for a pair.
Yeah. So I was like, what? Because I'm picturing these brass things over at Lowe's, right? So I look at these hinges, and these hinges are machined out, smooth.
Yeah, you're not going to find any slop or sag in a hinge like that.
No, and when I opened the doors on that gun cabinet, there was no bind, no drag, no nothing. So ultimately, what you're providing people is, and this is something I would challenge people with, because this is, as I get older, I realize through youth's stupidity, I realize that if I would have just spent an extra $200, maybe $300, then a lot of those things that I bought, I would still have. So there is a little bit of a understanding that when you buy something that's custom and that you've made, it isn't going to be something that falls apart in 5 years. How many times do we buy this throw together cabinet because we need this little cabinet for whatever, and we go down to the box store, whatever it is, Walmart, Target, whatever, and we put this thing together, and you bump into it 3 or 4 times, and it falls apart over the course of...
Yeah. So those cabinets you're describing sound like the things that garage sales and move-out days are made of.
Yes, exactly. So when you make something, the odds of, let's say, I asked you to make me an end table, and you made the end table per your specs and the way you do things. There's a very good chance that I'm going to be able to have my kids give it to their grandkids, as long as they take care of it and don't tear it up, right? As long as you use it as intended, it should last. But in today's environment, this box store stuff that we buy, you can use it as intended, and it still falls apart. So that's what I mean by you're underselling yourself a little bit. I think people aren't putting the value in how much money you're not going to spend later.
Yeah, and I don't want to scare people away with what we're talking about with custom either. There's a lot of different levels to that. We make it based off of a budget and a design criteria, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about something that was made very specifically to really get people to stare at it and really draw them in on it. So it was intentionally made a little over the top.
Yeah.
So we don't always do that because, let's face it, that's not what your budget always is. Do you necessarily need that set of hinges? Probably not for everything. There's good ones out there that can be had at a little bit cheaper price, but that's an extra touch that's really going to set that piece apart or help ensure that the function of it stays where it is for the long term.
Yeah, and that cabinet also had, how tall were those doors, the front doors?
Those doors,
5
I
foot,
believe
like
they're
that.
about 4 foot tall.
4 foot tall. So you're talking about a door that's 4 foot by 2 foot?
Yeah, I think 4 foot by 2, and they're 2 doors.
Yeah.
I believe it was a 1/4 inch shatterproof glass inside.
So you're looking at a door that you can't really afford to sag.
Yep.
And you ensured it didn't sag because you donated this to Pheasants Forever. So this is the other side of this conversation, that your business isn't just out there to gouge and to rack in as much money as you can. You're also taking your business and you're giving back to the community, and you're giving back to organizations that Pheasants Forever is one of those organizations that 95 to 97% of the income is driven and guided by the chapter, and it goes directly back into that local community. So what you're doing is you're giving back to the community through Pheasants Forever, and not just take. You're actually making sure that you get back at the same time. Isn't that correct?
Oh, that's correct.
And how long have you been supporting Pheasants Forever?
I think this will be the 3rd year that I've been given donations for Pheasants Forever now.
And how old is your oldest?
My oldest is 6 years old.
So you were kind of busy before that. So you probably didn't really have time to donate much time or effort to being able to make things for anything else other than your necessary needs at that time. Isn't that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. Now, kind of like we talked before, do have call it a 9 to 5, but I can't think of a time where my job actually started at 9 o'clock.
Or you got off at 5?
Or when I get off at 5,
Yeah.
So most of the stuff, and on top of that, is I have a 6-year-old and I have a 4-year-old and a wife at home. When I go home, your kids are only little for a little bit, right?
Yep.
You have to spend the time with them. Eventually, it's bedtime, go to bed, and so most of my stuff is done after that time period, working at night, and then get a little bit of sleep, go do the 9 to 5 thing again.
So you're burning the midnight oil to be able to donate even to these places and to be able to run your side business. Also in your side business, I understand that you're an FFL. For people that don't know what an FFL is, why don't you go ahead and explain that, and as being an FFL, what areas you can help them out if they're looking for things.
Sure. So, as you said, I am an FFL, or a federal firearms licensee, which means that I'm able to purchase firearms from wholesalers or firearms manufacturers and then distribute them to the public, going through all the same things that anybody that wants to go down to Cabela's or Walmart or any other gun shop, purchase something, I can help them with the same thing. Kind of skip back a little bit, just to the name of the business, Becker's Expensive Hobbies. Well, you want to guess what 2 of my expensive hobbies, at least according to my wife, are? Firearms and woodworking. And so I found a way that I can take it and go, well, now I can maybe get to do my hobby just a little bit cheaper than what I did before, but at the same time I can provide a service to other people and maybe make a little bit of side cash that generally gets put back into Becker's Expensive Hobbies.
Which really ultimately makes for a really good time. But one of the things that, as we grow older, and you're significantly younger than I am, but as we grow older, you're also starting this even kind of part-time. You're also setting yourself up to be able, when you do retire in 50 years or something.
According to my wife, I'll never retire. I believe that was a conversation that she and I had at one point, and I'm pretty sure one day I'll die at the 9 to 5, and if I do retire from there, I will certainly be working on Becker's expensive hobbies.
Exactly. So you're setting yourself up for something to do when you retire. And that in my mind is super important. I've seen too many people retire at retirement age and then turn around and really not really know what they're going to do. So by setting this up now and using, while you have your 9 to 5 to pay the household bills and all that, then you have the income from Becker's Expensive Hobbies to be able to purchase your tools, your play toys, and all those things before you retire, and still be able to make the high quality product that you currently do and be able to sell that and maybe commercialize some of that. I also know that you are the sole maker of Rub Me Down Barbecue's cutting boards. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So those are on our website, Rub Me Down Barbecue LLC at Shopify.com. And why don't you explain the two types of cutting boards that we offer? We offer the cross grain and the butcher block. Can you explain those two and what the differences are?
Yeah, the two types would be a face grain.
Face grain.
Grain. So when somebody looks at a normal board, what you're looking at is the face grain of something. The challenge on doing something with the face grain is that's the direction that any of your boards want to warp. And so when anybody looks at an actual custom cutting board, a lot of the challenge is going into that is taking a board, stabilizing it, and getting it to look right and make sure that it's not going to just warp on them. It's going to be flat. You're not rocking when you're cutting on it. Then the other type that we're talking about is a butcher block, which people are probably more familiar with, is the style that looks like strips as you're looking at it. And the big challenge with that one is it takes a lot more time to put one of those together. It's quite a bit more stable probably than what your face grain type is. Depending on what your taste is, it has a different aesthetic as well. Some people really like the look of the face grain. Some people really like the look of a butcher block. And then there's a third type of cutting board which we haven't done anything for the Rub Me Down business on. It's an end grain cutting board. Those are generally a little more decorative, where they require more of a coating onto them, because if you think of wood, the ends of wood or the grain in wood is kind of little straws. So on an end grain cutting board, you're basically putting all of those little straws sticking straight up into the bottom of your meat or into your cut. So every time you're slicing across that, you're kind of opening up those little pores or the different fibers for something that may you might get some of the juices or contaminants coming off of it to soak down in and soak into the wood a little bit more than what you're getting on a face grain or the butcher block style. And so I think you can get away with doing something that's a little bit more sanitary or user friendly for somebody that's going to really use their board, as opposed to just look at it, by sticking with those types of boards instead of an end grain board.
So everybody, I just got Cutting Board 101. I just learned more about a cutting board than I ever knew in my whole life. Thank you. I didn't know that about the one you just covered. I actually didn't even know that about the face grain, that you have to stabilize the board before you put it together. I didn't know that. I knew about the butcher block. Just in my simpleton mind, it's just a bunch of boards stacked up. But the one thing I can say is the cutting boards that you made for us are these things, like I said, I could hand it down to my kids, and my kids are probably going to be able to hand it down to their grandkids as long as they clean it right appropriately and apply the correct oil treatment and stuff. Do me a favor. One of the things that I notice people have a problem understanding. So our cutting boards, if you request it to be etched, we etch the Rub Me Down Barbecue logo on the cutting board. Explain to people why you're not supposed to cut on that side.
Sure. You're not supposed to cut on that side. One, for the same reasons that we were just talking about, is you're exposing more of the fibers to allow for stuff to pool into them. Say your juices, your blood, anything coming off of what you just cut off of it. You're asking for remnants to kind of collect inside of a laser etching. The laser etching looks really cool, but it's harder to clean. On top of that, you're looking at something that, if you're getting in there and scrubbing, might be a place for a failure of a board, a little harder to maintain potentially. But the biggest one is trying to not trap some of the juices or the contaminants or something coming off of the meat, to really make sure that you've got a safe cutting board for future use.
Okay. Just like when we interviewed Jack, sometimes we have questions from our technical crew, and my wife's back there and she has a question. So
what kind of treatment do you put on the cutting board?
So what she asked is, what kind of treatment do you put on the cutting boards, and how do you maintain that?
Yep. So there's a couple different ways that people can do that. I use what's called a salad bowl finish, which is a mixture of a varnish and an oil in it. The big thing you want to stay away from in cutting boards that a lot of people probably don't do is you want to stay away from building up a film finish. A film finish that comes out of your normal polyurethane is kind of putting a plastic type coating on it, which is really asking for you to nick and carve into the finish, which creates all the little scratches, which creates a place for all of those bacteria, salmonella, whatever coming off of your meat to pool up or hold, making it that much harder to clean, because how hard is it to get your wash rag down inside a knife mark? And so the better way to do a cutting board is wiping it down with some sort of an oil. A lot of times people will use some sort of a mineral oil on it. The thing with a mineral oil is it needs constant reapplication. And so by using a salad bowl finish, it's closer to a mineral oil than it is to what would be considered a film finish or a polyurethane or more of a plasticky type finish or a build-up type finish. It's still getting the oil that's soaking into the fibers, but it has a little bit of varnish into it that it kind of seals off the top of the wood fibers, so it doesn't require the extra maintenance out of a board that what you're having to put into some of your boards that were just made with a mineral oil.
Would you advise them putting in a dishwasher or not?
Anything, any wood cutting board, I definitely would stick away from putting into a dishwasher. Dishwashers are just throwing a lot of really hot liquid at it, hard, and any kind of a crack or any kind of a seam, you're just forcing moisture into it, and then forcing that with a rapid moisture or a rapid heat change, which causes a shrink swell in the wood. And that's where you get a lot of your failures, is forcing moisture into it and then rapidly changing the temperature of it. Wood doesn't respond very well to changes in temperature or to changes in moisture, and if you do both of those at the same time, you're only going to have that cutting board for a certain amount of time.
Yeah. So the question was, can you put it in a dishwasher? I think you covered that, but I wanted to clarify what the question was. So I'm going to ask you, because you gave a really well explained what to do. So, but I'm going to get finite with you a little bit, and maybe I'm going to use this phrase, make it layman. So I use my cutting board and I cut whatever, and I'm getting ready to clean it. What should I do what process should I use to clean it? And then, and how often do I need to use the salad bowl finish on my cutting board? Should I use it every time I clean it? Should I use it? How often should that be? Or is that kind of by feel or by look of the cutting board?
Yeah, so answer the second question first. So with the salad bowl finish, you've got something that's got a lot longer life to it than what you would have if you had, say, a mineral oil.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of your, again, custom cutting board with somebody that does them will do a mineral oil. It looks really nice, but that's where you're going to have a lot more of a maintenance schedule with your cutting board. If you're using it, washing it, you're probably going to want to be putting it on there, if not every month, every couple months. With a salad bowl finish, you're not going to have that same thing because it has that film finish that does soak into the fibers a little bit. And as far as when to reapply something like that, your cutting board is going to be the thing that tells you that. That's going to depend a lot on your use. So if you're starting to see it doling out or really starting to expose the wood, that's when you're going to want to look into reapplying your finish on top of it. Now, going back to the first question of how do I clean it, I clean mine soap, water, rag, normal, and then I try and dry it off. Don't let the water just sit on and soak into it. I'm trying to remove the material left over from whatever I was cutting as quickly as I can when I'm done with it, and then remove the water and the soaps off of it as soon as I can after I've washed it. I still want to recommend using a soap or giving it a good scrub because we are talking about the potential for some sort of an illness if you don't clean it well. But the thing there, again, goes if you really want to screw up something this wood, leave it exposed to moisture for a long period of time.
So a lot of people would think they need to take their cutting board and use a little bleach water on it. Is that going to have any impact? Because I know a lot of people that like to take a little bit of bleach water, put it on there, wait like 5 minutes, and then wipe it off. What damage does that do to the cutting board, if any?
I don't think you're really going to see a whole lot of damage that comes from wiping it down with bleach or even letting it sit on there for a small period of time. I mean, cutting boards are made to withstand moisture sitting on top of them, right? So as long as you've got that film still on there or the oil or protectant that you're sealing off those fibers from anything soaking in there, you're not going to see any kind of issue with letting a bleach or any other kind of moisture sit on for a smaller period of time. And you're certainly not going to see any bad effects by washing it off like that. But I don't think that that's necessarily what you have to do.
Yeah. So you're saying it doesn't hurt, but it's not really super necessary to do that. As long as you use a good soap, warm water, dry it. Don't just soak it with warm water and put it in your strainer, right? Just dry it off immediately. And when I'm going to make some assumptions. So when you said after a given period of time, you'll see the color fade. So can you, very seldom are we going to cut on the corner of a cutting board, right? So should you compare the color of the corner of the cutting board to the center where you're cutting at to kind of get that feel?
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was referring to. Thank you for bringing that up. But that's kind of what I'm referring to. I'm saying let your cutting board tell you that maybe it's time to start refinishing. You're going to have that spot or those spots out on the edge where you're not really using it all the time that are going to not be worn. They're not going to be weathered from all of their repetitive use. And so you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm really starting to see a difference now out here in the middle as opposed to what it looked like before, because I can tell that off of the edges or maybe the backside if you've got an etched cutting board. And so that's going to kind of be that hint that, hey, maybe I need to refinish it a little bit.
And so because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to think of all the questions would come up with somebody. So if I'm using a cutting board and I see some tatter to it, if I take a little bit of sandpaper and go over it and brush it off. And then what is there some? Should I use like tack cloth to get that extra dust out of there before I seal it, or what should I do there, or should I not worry about that and then go ahead and seal it with the salad bowl finish, or what should I do there if I think I need to get rid of something off the cutting board?
Yeah, actually, if you're starting to see that, I would absolutely recommend going and giving it a sanding and getting everything smoothed back out. That way you're getting the right seal and the right finish back on, as opposed to something that's going to wear out even sooner. Because if you've got extra surfaces exposed, those are extra places that are going to cause a finish to fail in a shorter period of time. So getting it back towards the original surface is going to be in your best interest before refinishing anything. As far as getting the dust off of it, a tack cloth works really well for getting that off. I have a vacuum hooked up to my sander, so I'm pulling it up as I'm doing it. I know most people don't have that, but being able to go through and some sort of a tack cloth, or even wiping it down with maybe a mineral spirits, giving it a quick something that flashes off quickly, that really allows it to put a little bit of moisture on those particles, and they'll stick to your cotton or your
there you go,
like a t-shirt material. Use something like that as opposed to something like a sock material or something that might leave residue behind. Use a t-shirt type material with just a little bit of mineral spirits, and that'll pull that dust off of it, so you're not going to have to deal with that on your finish.
Oh, that's, I'm not a woodworking guy. I've done some woodworking, but my level of woodworking is building a house, not this finite stuff that you do. That's just really, it's really high quality stuff. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. If you guys want to check out those cutting boards at rubmedownbarbecuellc.com. It's actually rubmedownbarbecue at llcshopify.com. You'll be able to see David's cutting boards there. And when we put David's cutting boards up for sale on our website, we're not getting much of, we're just barely covering the cost, helping cover the cost of the website. So they are as much as cost as David would sell them to you for. So thank you again for sharing that. A lot of people, and that's the thing, you would think most everybody knows how to maintenance a cutting board, right? But there's a lot of people out there, that's almost a lost art. And
well, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I mean, we live in an environment anymore where we go for something that's probably a little bit cheaper than going for something like a cutting board of that style. So most of us probably are used to the plastic or a urethane type of a cutting board, because that's just what you see. Most they don't take the same type of care. They might not look the same, but it gets the job done in just a little bit cheaper way, and so a lot of people go that route, which I think has led to not understanding what that care required would be, which ultimately leads to some people that might get their first wood cutting board leading to a failure in it.
Yeah, and that's why it's really good that we covered this on the podcast, because now people are like, what did he say? He can go, this will be out there forever. They can go back, oh, he said this, and they can listen to it a couple times until they really get to the finite ability of what they should do with their cutting board. Because ultimately, if you think about it, you can buy in your lifetime those little flimsy cutting boards that you were talking about that a lot of people buy. You're going to go through 10 or 20 or 30 of those in your lifetime. I guarantee you're not giving it to your grandkids.
Well, how many of us have those? And if you look at it, you can tell after a couple years how many knife scuffs are in there.
Oh.
So all the same things we were talking about with the ability to build up bacterias and everything. It's in each one of those cuts that you've made, and it's there. Yeah, you're not gonna have the same life out of that cutting board.
Oh no,
you just don't see the same type of failure out of that cutting board. It's more of a call it a silent killer, I
Yep.
guess.
Yeah, and those plastic cutting boards are they're. I heard some stuff that we're not going to get into today, but ultimately, plastic cutting boards and these plastic things like this, we probably should start steering away from. There was a research, there was some data released here I think a couple years ago about how using all the plastics that we have is starting to create some kind of issues in reproductive situations and stuff. I'm not going to get into it. I haven't read the study. I just heard about it, so I'm going to skip right off that. The other thing I want to talk to you about is I know for a fact, because I dig into on people before I get them on the podcast, that you and I have a mutual friend. And our mutual friend is Cherney, and you guys go on a hunting trip annually, or at least you try to. And I believe it's for pronghorn.
Yeah, that'd be correct.
So why don't you walk us through, because I'm going to be honest with you. You guys tell me the stories of what you guys do on this pronghorn thing, and I'm like, I don't think so. So walk us through what a weekend looks like. When you guys go on this pronghorn
Well,
trip.
first of all, I do have to say that pronghorn in Kansas do exist, regardless of what my wife says. They do exist. They're out there. But we go out. Anybody can get an over-the-counter archery antelope or pronghorn tag in Kansas. They primarily are out in the western, maybe 4th or 5th of Kansas. Not a very big herd size, not a large space that they exist. We like to go out there and walk around on public land and try and do spot and stalk archery antelope hunts. So if you've been out to western Kansas, you realize there's not a lot of trees or tall grass or much of anything else. And so trying to stalk up on an animal that uses its eyes and speed for protection, you kind of start to get a picture of what the challenges look like. It's
bow hunting.
Yeah,
bow hunting,
yeah. Getting into, we won't take a shot that's over 55 yards. Is out there, the wind also generally blowing in the 20 to 35 mile an hour range as we're trying to do this. It's a little bit of a challenging hunt. I personally haven't been successful yet to the point of having drawn back. We've been inside 65 yards a couple of times on them, but haven't been able to quite close the deal yet on getting into what I would consider to be an ethical or good shot for me to take in the conditions that we've been hunting. But yeah, it's a trip that we both look forward to every year. It takes a lot of skill, patience, and determination to keep going.
So what he's leaving out, what I was trying to get him to get into, is you guys hear me talk about how he's an engineer and how he's got this side business and everything else. But my point behind this is he's got a family, so he's broke. And so they don't go out and get a hotel room. Now I've made my statement. Now you know where I'm wanting you to go. So explain the weekend.
Gotcha.
What you guys do in the weekend. And so keep in mind, they love doing this. That these two guys, this is their idea of fun.
Well, so what we do is what you're getting after is, we load up the truck and we drive out and find a campsite and we spend the weekend at a tent, essentially. But keep in mind, this is a lot more of this is a Holiday Inn compared to the elk hunt that we took last year.
Yeah, we were going to get to that.
So on the antelope hunts, we're traveling in a truck to the campsite. So yeah, we're sleeping in a tent, but at the same time, we have the luxury of a truck bed, so we can have cots, sleeping bags, quite a bit more of the luxury items. Even it's more like a family camping trip type experience.
But it's also in the winter.
Not antelope. So the antelope hunt happens in August, September.
Oh, okay.
So
I think
you're
I'm getting my
pretty-
hunts mixed up.
Yeah, you're a little confused on that one. It's a pretty hot hunt most of the time. In Western Kansas, at the time we're doing it, it's 90 degrees still. We walk about 25 miles a day, so we're probably not a couple people that most people want to share a tent with at the end of those days.
So what you're saying is you're definitely aromatic, most likely.
It's a good thing that antelope rely on their
Sight.
eyes and their speed to get away, not their noses.
Well, here's he just covered the other side of this that I'm like, I don't think so. They're covering 25 miles a day. My fat body is not walking 25 miles a day on trying to hunt something that can see me from 5 miles away in Western Kansas. So for the people that don't know Western Kansas, it's pretty much flat, right? Or am I mistaken?
No, it's pretty flat, or at least it appears to be flat until you go out and try and spend a little bit of time trying to spot something on there. You start to realize the cuts, the ridges, and all the little contours that you just skate over with your eyes until you're actually into an environment where you're trying to notice those things. Because that's how you're approaching these animals, is you're trying to use the rolls in a hill or the cuts made from floodwaters that have come through over time. Different terrain features like that. And after a couple of these experiences, you start to realize just how much variability to the landscape there is that maybe you've overlooked in the past.
Yeah. And those hunts are just, and this is the other side of this that I'm trying to get to, is I know they've gone out 2 or 3 years.
So we skipped last year because we went on a little bit bigger hunt. Last year we decided to go on an elk hunt in Colorado, which I said is a little bit different experience.
We're going to tag on that one here in a little bit. So when you guys are going out, the expectation of getting an animal is 10%?
I'd say the harvest success rate is less than 10%.
Okay.
You might see a 10% success rate on, say, the antelope hunt, but the people that are going to be in that are generally the people that are putting up a ground blind and sitting next to water.
Yeah.
And so those numbers are probably skewed from the guys that are doing the full spot and stock that what we're going into.
Okay. So ultimately where I'm headed is you guys are doing it more for the experience.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys are going out to spend some time, 2 buddies, good friends, going to go out, going to hunt, going to enjoy the experience, going to enjoy the spot and stock. And the harvesting of the animal is just kind of a bonus.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the challenge of it, right?
Yeah.
You could go to the same places that we're going, and if you were lucky enough to draw an antelope tag in Western Kansas with a rifle, be quite a bit different experience than what we're getting. Getting into rifle range on them, that's something that you can do pretty regularly, and it doesn't take necessarily the highest degree of skill to do it because it is fairly flat out there. You can glass them up from a distance and get into a couple 100 yards because ultimately antelope or pronghorn aren't scared of you because they move so fast. We're talking about an animal that can cover a mile before you can cover 100 yards.
And so what you're saying is that maybe if you had a rifle tag, your wife might believe they exist.
If we had rifle tags, my wife would definitely have to believe they exist. We'd have been a lot more successful.
So I'm going to switch gears because this is kind of what I do. I'm going to jump back to your FFL license. So through your FFL license, I know several people that have been able to acquire firearms through you. Is there any kind of firearm that you couldn't get? And if someone did decide to get a firearm from you, what would be the process they would have to go through to be able to take that firearm home?
Yeah, sure. So first we'll cover your first question is what kind of firearms. So I can get in most firearms that are available at your normal gun stores, your Cabela's or wherever. There are some exceptions to that. Some companies are exclusive and they require you to be a dealer specifically of that brand. They don't work through wholesalers. I generally get my firearms through wholesalers. Now, the next part of it, what is the process to get a firearm from me? It's get in touch with me. Hey, what are you looking for? I have most of the people that get in touch with me looking for a firearm are saying, hey, I'm thinking of something like this. What can you find? What's available? And so I get to have the fun, because it's one of my expensive hobbies, is I get to go browsing around and help them to pick something out or suggest, hey, maybe you should look at this, maybe look at this. What do you think of this? Give them a couple price ranges and say, hey, for this money, maybe we go this way. And so get in touch with me, then we'll decide on something. Or if you have something specific in mind, it makes my job even that much easier. I can tell you, hey, I can get it, I can't get it, and then order it in, and then come in, do your normal paperwork, fill out the forms, go through all the same checks. For those that don't know, there is a process that goes through regardless of whether you're buying a firearm from a big store or if you're buying it from somebody that's got a home FFL. It's the same thing. It goes through the same checks, all of the same processes. So there's no difference from how it is from a law standpoint. You have to go through all of the same things. It's a very tightly regulated business, as it should be. It's a very serious business. But did I cover what you were wanting to get into on
Yes,
that?
you did. So one of the things that I want to point out for so you're talking about this pronghorn antelope hunt. So a couple years ago, I purchased a 6.5 Creedmoor from you. We were fortunate. You had a sell, buy so many, and David's really good. He's really open with us. Matter of fact, through that process, we were able to buy extremely inexpensive 6.5 Creedmoors for the Pheasants Forever banquet that drew in revenue for us to support Hunters Ed and youth hunts and women's hunting activities. So I bought one of these 6.5 Creedmoors. It didn't have a scope. So I was like, hey, David, eventually I'm going to want to get a scope. And David knows me well enough that I'm a little busy. So I put almost everything on the back burner. And he come to me and he said, Steven, I understand you want to get a scope and this gun's your wife's, so on and so forth. And I was like, yeah. He goes, there is a scope out there that has a laser rangefinder on it. And you put in your calibers, and I'm going to have you explain this because you put in your calibers and whatnot, you hit the rangefinder, it automatically adjusts a dot on the scope to that distance. Could you walk them through that and kind of what I'm trying to do is show them that you can provide more than just the firearm side of it. You
Sure.
can,
What you're referring to, it happens to be a Sig Sauer scope and rangefinder combo. They were kind of a pioneer in this type of market. There's a few other companies out there now, but what it does is it has a Bluetooth link between the scope and the rangefinder. So once you shoot a range, if you're in a certain setup mode on your scope, that range then gets transferred through Bluetooth from the rangefinder to an app in the phone, on your phone, and then your scope and your rangefinder are all talking together via the Bluetooth connection. And so it takes that and ultimately transfers that range over to your scope, which then, based off of the 0 that you've set, adjusts and puts a new dot at a certain point on your crosshair that says, here, put this dot on your target. And it takes a lot of the guessing out of it that most people are going to be doing with a traditional duplex style reticle.
And with the scope, I can put windage in it and everything else, right? I could look at what the wind is that day, put the windage in, and it will adjust for me.
Correct. That requires a little bit more of a manual approach. There
Yeah.
are some different items out there, like a Kestrel or a wind meter, that can give you some of the more detailed information, but you do have that ability in that app to put that information in and have that dial into those scopes as well. It's not just, but if you want the simplest form of what it's doing, it's just taking the range and doing a Bluetooth transfer over. So that's your quick. Most people are going to use it like that. But it's kind of, you were saying with the other side of the different things that I have, I do have the ability to get into some of the scope manufacturers or different optics, as well as some of the accessory items. Red dots, I can get into some of the protection safes, get into camping accessories, hunting accessories. Was able to purchase some stuff for different people for turkey hunting this year. Got some turkey decoys, calls, things like that is some of the stuff that I can get in if somebody's interested in looking for that.
So that's pretty cool right there. So right now, every gun owner is listening to this podcast going, what about ammo? Can you get ammo?
Pre-2019, I could get a whole bunch of ammo. I could get just about anything you want. Unfortunately, we're still not quite stocked up to where things were 3 years ago.
Okay.
That's just the way of the world. Now, you can get some things if you're not looking for something very specific. We might be able to find something, but there's still a lot of calibers out there that
Pretty tight.
ammunition manufacturers are still way behind. I heard something last year that said that ammo manufacturers are making more rounds than they've ever made before, and the big rush of people buying up ammunition over the last couple of years and the increased demand for that ammunition has depleted all of the stores that everybody had built up. And it's going to take, even if things go back to normal and you can get all the supplies, all of the shortages that exist in the world right now just ended tomorrow, it would take, I believe, 4 years for those manufacturing companies to build back the stores they had prior to 3 years ago.
Wow, that's information I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, and that's
pretty,
even considering the fact that they're building more plants now. So ammo manufacturers are pumping out more ammunition than they ever have. They have to be maybe a little more selective because they're catering to the masses, right?
Yes.
There was a point 2 years ago where it kind of paid off to have that unique caliber because maybe you could go find it somewhere on a shelf. They hadn't got to it yet. It's kind of switched now. So if all those ammo manufacturers said, well, yeah, it's really neat that you have your 25-06, but I sell a whole bunch of 308.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shut down your 25-06 line because I need another 308 line.
Yep.
Or your 6.5 Creedmoor. 6.5 Creedmoor has taken a ton of the business out of the 308. You have a very similar cartridge. So something like that, owning something that's a little bit more mainstream has become a lot more of a benefit for you these days than what it may have been 2 years ago when all of the ammo shortages hit. I think you can find 9mm, 223, stuff like that.
5.56, 223,
That's the stuff that you can find because, and the reason for that isn't because of anything that's gone down in demand. In fact, the demand is still ridiculously high. You're just seeing it because people are dedicating entire plants to pumping out just that.
And which is pretty impressive.
Oh, absolutely. They're trying to appease the masses, and you're going to do that at the expense of, the fact. Let's face it, the people that are looking for that 223 ammo are probably the people that are going to go out there and they're going to blow off 100 rounds because it's an afternoon and they feel like shooting.
Yeah.
The guy that bought that 25-06 ammo, he's probably going to buy a box of ammo this year.
Yeah.
And he might shoot half of it.
Yep.
So if you're trying to cater to somebody, makes all the sense in the world. You're going to go over here and you're going to supply to the guy that's going to buy ammunition because it's a nice afternoon and I feel like going out and pulling the trigger a couple times.
Yep. I would agree, because ammunition companies are businesses that need to make profit just like everybody else. So I'm doing what I do best. I'm switching gears again. You have a young family, and I am of the understanding that you guys have a tendency to go on a trout fishing trip with your family every year. And I think it's in Missouri.
Yep.
Ish. Why don't you to me, this is my favorite part of the podcast. I like to ask you, what is your funniest hunting or fishing experience, and what is your most memorable? So right now, because it's your family, I'm assuming that's going to be some of the most memorable, because I know you've got a young daughter and young son. What with them? Let's say, what is your most memorable fishing trip or hunting trip with your kids? Let's do that one first.
Yeah, well, we can start with the kids. So, kind of getting my kids into hunting via squirrel hunting, and one that's probably going to stick with me for a long time because my son will probably not let me forget it. I think he's going to continue to remember is this past year, now that he's turned 6, he's starting to really get a lot more patience and understanding about what we're out there to do. In the past, so when we first started going, I bought him a little squirrel call.
Yeah.
And so we go out there. If we didn't see a squirrel, that's not what the hunt's about, right?
Yep.
We talked about that with the antelope hunt.
Oh, yeah.
Hunting isn't about going out and harvesting something all the time. It's about the experience of being out there. So let him go out there. He played with the squirrel call, make some noise, eventually get cold, and you go back in. Well, this past year, getting out there, and he was really into it. And we're sitting out here watching. I saw a squirrel, pointed it out. We shot that squirrel, picked it up, went back over and sit down for a little bit, try and wait out and see if we can find something else. And after about 10 minutes, I'm looking off to the south, trying to pick something out in the mass of trees. And he goes, "Daddy, there's a squirrel." Okay, I've been looking. Where's that? Looking and it's over there. Kind of, yeah, okay. I'm not seeing this. After another minute, squirrel comes out and starts running across the branches. Like, I'll be darned. He picked out, and so he spotted the squirrel and eventually get it out there, and I shoot it and we harvest it. And so he loves to remind me of the fact, "Daddy, remember that time that I saw the squirrel and you didn't?"
Yeah. That, and that drives that desire into young youth hunters, fishermen, and things like that. So I know, because I've seen your desk, you have a picture on your desk of your son and your daughter holding fish. I pretty sure I've seen the one with. I know I've seen the one with your son holding one. I'm pretty sure I've seen one with your daughter. Yeah. Tell me about that day.
Yes, I think the one that you're talking about, my son would have been about 3 years old at that time on our trout fishing trip in Missouri, and he came down just getting him into starting to be able to cast and running through everything. And so in this particular place, it's Bennett Springs, Missouri. It's a spring-fed stream that they rear and stock with rainbow trout. There's some brown trout there. When people clean the trout, there's 3. So go back a little bit. There's 3 different stages to the fishing there. You have a dry or a fly area only that allows single hooks, and it has to be feathered or fly fishing type jigs, lures. Then there's another spot where it gets into and allows treble hooks, but it still flies. And then the third area is a plastic, live, or artificial bait area. So up in the first 2 zones, the fish up there don't see anything artificial. When people catch fish and they go and clean them, and they take them and they chuck the guts back into the water as they're cleaning the fish. there's a feeding frenzy a lot of times for the trout along the edges of the banks. And so this particular time, my son, 3, he can't cast very far yet. So got him a little white jig on his pole and got him set up. There were some fish that were patrolling the edges of the shoreline waiting for somebody to throw some stuff in. And so we're kind of playing on that nature of the fish, that they're looking for that particular type of thing at the certain time of day, usually. So
which is a really good plan to get your son on a fish. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that, I mean, it's taken a little bit differently if everybody's seeing a 30-year-old walking around behind them trying to play with the fish around the edge. But when you're a 3-year-old,
yeah,
it's taken a little bit differently. And again, not trying to do it you're not trying to do it on the places where people are throwing in the guts, or you're not using the guts necessarily. You're fishing and targeting that action of the animal. That way, it's not chumming or baiting in that way. But get him and throws out there. He pulls in a fish. We take it, take that one, put it on a stringer for him, because he can't catch a fish and not want to eat it.
Yeah.
And so get him throwing it back in there. Sitting there that particular time, I think he ended up catching 4 different fish for a kid that he'd never really caught much for trout. I mean, he could barely cast a pole 10 feet at this point. But just getting to set him, by the time he was done, I mean, it only lasts so long before the fish figure out it's a jig and it's not really anything for them. But I think we had most of that area shoreline that was just sitting there watching and kind of cheering on my little 3-year-old and just
catching fish.
Yeah, catching fish and just watching. That's the next generation. You're getting them excited and being able to see that. I think back, you mentioned that I've been doing this trip for a long time. I started going down to this particular place when I was 5 years old.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So he just a little bit younger when he started going there as opposed to when I started fishing there. So been fishing there for a few years at this point.
So you got a lot of memories there, and that keys this question, because my job is to ask questions here. So one of my next favorite things to ask is, we focused on you and your son. So your dad took you when you were 5. Can you think back your most memorable opportunity with your dad fishing on that?
Sure. So there are a couple things that come to mind. The first one, I don't remember quite as well, but I've got the story of it. So we ended up down there coming from the middle of Kansas. The rods we've got are bass poles and catfish rods. You're going down there to fish for trout. We show up with 8-10 pound test line on our big rods and reels. And we're not doing anything for catching fish. And apparently, I was known as a little bit of a talker at the time at 5 years old. And so apparently there was this lady that was probably about my grandparents at the time's age, not too far down, and she was catching fish. Well, I wasn't catching fish, and so I wandered down there at 5 years old and started questioning her about what she was doing that we weren't doing. And in the process, she started kind of noticing that we weren't catching and kind of explained to us the things that we needed to do, shared her bait, showed us the things to do, and so we all kind of got a learning experience on how to do this on the bait side from that experience, because I was the kid that
talkative.
I want to catch fish. You're catching fish. Why am I not catching fish? So we kind of learned from there, and then from the next thing that really strikes a memory for me is, taking a couple of boys. My brother is about 16 months younger than I am, so we're both pretty young at this point. So my dad learned to fly fish because he got tired of untangling little boy fishing rods, so he could go to the different zone than where we were And he got to relax for the morning. And so about the time we turned 10, decided to start teaching us how to fly fish. And so we got to go up to the fly fishing zone. And at that point, we still weren't necessarily allowed to fish where everybody else was. We kind of got a little backwater area that he'd let us be in. But it was, he learned to fly fish so that he could actually fish and get his vacation instead of just untangling rods every couple seconds. And
I think as dads,
and I'm getting my payback for that same thing right now.
Yes, as dads, we completely understand that. It is you've got to love it, but at the same time, there's a point when dad's got to have a break, right? And just like there's a point when mom's got to have a break, and I think mom's getting a break when you're taking the kids fishing. Yeah, mom's like, I'm out of here. Now my wife would be over there fishing and still telling me to take care of the kids.
My wife likes to come down there. She wants to be a part of it. She wants to be right there and with it. Part of the whole having two little kids is she's not necessarily getting a lot of her own fishing in at those times, but try to do it to where I take care of most of the rod action when we've got all four of us down there fishing.
Yeah, and that's to this day, if I take my family fishing, I'm taking my family fishing. I'm guiding. There's a reason when I go out fishing anymore, I pay a lot of times I'll just pay a guide, not because I don't know how to fish or I don't know where the fish are. It's just so much more relaxing to have someone else take care of stuff instead of me having to. After, I'm pretty old now. I'm almost 50. It's just easier, and fishing guides are typically very understanding. You tell them what you're looking for, and you have a fantastic time. So let's talk. I'm going to walk down a path that we got to be careful, okay? From this point forward, no names, not where we work, nothing about no specific details, okay? So you're an engineer at a given company. You've been working on this given product for a long time. Matter of fact, you're pretty close to being considered an expert in this given product line.
Let's face it, there aren't a lot of people that want to play with the systems that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So walk us down the path of what. So an engineering degree, and to get everything it takes to be a certified engineer isn't an easy path. So obviously you know math.
At least I used to.
Yeah. So let's kind of walk that path that from when you were growing up, what gave you the desire to be an engineer?
The funniest part of that is when I went to school to be an engineer, I couldn't have told you what an engineer was.
Oh, really?
Yep, true story. In high school, I was ahead of my class. So I spent a lot of time helping, or tutoring. I was very good in math. And so our math teacher, if he was going to be gone, would show me the assignments or give me the assignments a couple days in advance. I would do them and then get with him so that I could help substitutes teach the class while he was gone.
That's pretty impressive.
Then, say before tests, I was an aide, specifically my senior year, and I would do study groups for different people to work on and prep everybody for the tests. And so I actually was huge into sports. sports was what I wanted to do.
I
was really focused there.
I'm going to cut in real quick.
Okay.
So for you to, number one, really excel in math and really excel in school, and then be able to, and this is my point in this conversation. I'm old. I know a lot of people. I've experienced a lot of people that are really smart, but I haven't experienced a lot of people that are really smart with compassion and patience. For someone, high school age, to have the compassion and patience as a senior to be willing to have study groups, to volunteer their time to teach others that in today's society, a lot of these smart people would consider to be lesser. And you, as a teenager, I'm stressing teenager, this is the area in all our lives where we have a tendency to be self-absorbed as teenagers. And you had the compassion and caring enough to help others. That's something to be commended. That's pretty cool. So your sports, you were really into sports.
Yeah. So going back to that, is my dream was always more playing sports or something, and then maybe getting to a point where I got to coach. And so through those types of experience I was really leaning towards maybe becoming a teacher and a coach at that point in my life, and had some people say, hey, you're based off of where you're at grade point wise and what you're able to do, so maybe you should take a look at engineering. No idea what engineering was, but I was like, oh, and started looking into the curriculum a little bit, and it had a lot of the math stuff, and I said, well, I can go in and I can give engineering a shot, and if I don't like it, I'm already on the path towards being a math teacher. So I kind of have a fallback if I decide this wasn't the right thing, and I'm the kind of person that was the harder route. So I started down that route.
I can see that.
So take the harder route, and I've always got, if something happened, I could go back the other way. In my first year at Kansas State University, being an engineering student, I got the opportunity to have an internship with the company I ultimately decided to go to work for, which means that I've been with this company now for 14 years. So it's been a little while since then. Not long compared to some, but
almost half. No, I was about to say almost half your life, but not quite.
Yeah. So I've been with them for quite a while, but that was where I really felt like I finally started to understand what it was that engineering got into, and that kind of shifted my focus a little bit, and I became a proponent of helping or educating people to gain experiences instead of necessarily just focusing on GPA, and starting to really understand that if you want to get somewhere, the best way to do it is to go do it. And
Amen.
Figure it out. And that getting the relationships and just being able to have somebody take you and go, this is what it is, and start learning off of the physical thing instead of just looking at a book. And after I came back from that internship, I never looked at school the same. After that, honestly, school was the means to an end at that point.
Amen.
Up until that point, it had kind of been all I'd known. Just like anybody else at that point in life, what you've known is your classes. Whether you like them, whether you don't like them, that's what you know. At that point forward, it was, I now know what I want to do. How do I get to do that? And the way that I get to do that is by having more of those experiences. And so I started leveraging the relationships that I'd gained off of that first internship to gain more internships that I diversified. Never did the same internship twice, but ended up with 3 internships.
Were those 3 all with the same company?
They were all with the same company, but always in a different place.
Oh, that's good. That's a good plan.
I did something different with each of my internships. That way I got exposed to different bosses, different things that I was doing, and ultimately figuring out a little bit of what it was that I wanted to do. And I think that it's important for people to round themselves off. And in my current role, I've learned so much more than I ever would have if I would have stayed in my previous role.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for some of the changes that I've made along my career path that have allowed me to continue to grow and expand what it is that makes me who I am and the employee that I am.
There's things I want to say I'm just not going to say. The one thing I will say is you took a path that was, like you said, you took the hardest path. And one of the phrases that I've got two phrases that are in my mind right now. The first phrase is from a gentleman, Frank Sell, who has been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years now, 20 plus years. His phrase is, do it scared until you do it good. So you were willing to not necessarily do it scared, but you were taking the hardest path, the harder path, because it was the harder path and it challenged you more. So you were kind of doing it scared until you did it good. The other thing, I heard this one today and I liked it. So if you take a tree seed and you put it in a pot and you let that tree grow, okay, that pot will confine the ability for that tree to grow. So we're all God's seed, and when you put the seed into a pot, you're constraining that seed. So you chose to take the opportunity that God gave you to get out of that given pot, your comfort zone, school, the academic world, and you decided that I'm going to get out of the academic pot and I'm going to get into the big world, I'm going to say world pot of life experiences to grow and to let God seed you grow into what He designed you to be.
Yep. And I think along those lines, it goes into how I left college now. So when I did graduate college, I took a job as a test engineer first because I wanted to expand my understanding of, one, the products that I was going to be working on, and two, the people that were going to use them. So I specifically chose the path that I wanted to go out and I wanted to travel around and spend time with the equipment and systems that I was going to be eventually working on, not knowing when that would come, but knowing eventually it would come, and be able to gain and learn how it was used by people that paid their money for what I'm working on. And I believe that that gave me a huge leg up on where I got to, because I went that path and I was able to gain some sort of an expertise or an understanding at least of what it was that I was going to do beyond that. And even if I'm now talking about something that I maybe didn't necessarily spend the time using myself, because of the experiences and working through those systems, I can understand other systems a little bit better than I think that I would have, or understand interactions or reactions that happen within different components because of the time that I spent as a tester before I moved into my time as a designer. And then ultimately, I think everybody's heard the joke and say, what engineer put that there?
Yeah.
You can tell
I've said that.
You can tell that guy never worked on one of these. Well,
yep.
I'm here to tell you that I worked on it.
Yeah, amen.
And before you had your wrench there, I had my wrench there. I can probably tell you, yeah, that sucks to get to, but there's probably a reason.
Yeah.
that it's there. Sometimes there's things that you miss, you don't like to, but sometimes it happens. Other times you go, that's there because ultimately that sucks a lot less than the alternative.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to touch super vaguely on the product you work on, and I'm not even going to use the name of it. What I'm going to touch on is the market share. So I'm going to get the market share of the product David works on. If I'm right and my research is correct, the product you work on has the highest market share in the market above everybody else. Is that correct?
Yeah, not only does it have the highest market share among all the competitors, it has about a 55% market share, so it's blowing away
pretty much everybody. So the market share of this product is I assume somebody has 25%. I'm just making some assumption. Keep in mind, I'm dumb. So you've got double the market share of your closest competitor. So what you're working on is, and you are, like I said, you are one of the very few experts in this field, in my opinion, and many other people's opinion. And you're helping for your company to control a 55% market share. And I know you're working on a very unique new opportunity to increase that market share even further.
Yep, that'd be correct. Let's face it, if you're stagnant, you're not really stagnant. You're moving backwards. So you always have to be moving forward. And for people, even sometimes you may not see changes happening, but trust me, there are things going on in the background. There's still developments being made. You're always trying to move something forward.
Yeah. I just noticed something. But hold on, let me refocus. So you're right. And as any entrepreneur, so with your last statement, if you're sitting stagnant, you're not going to continue to grow. You're not going to continue to, in all honesty, if you sit stagnant, you're actually going to lose market share or you're going to lose sales. So you always have to be innovative and doing more and doing better. So with that being said, even with your woodworking business, you're always looking for the next best way to do something, aren't you? Because I know you've shown me some stuff that I've never seen. It's probably not new. It was just new to me. Some kind of pocket screw or something. Hidden screw that I'd never seen before. This was a couple years ago. So, but explain that silly thing that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think you're probably referring to something that is from the Festool Domino line. So Festool a couple years ago came out with a certain knockdown hardware that works with one of their tools. And so for those that know what a mortise and tenon is, the Festool Domino essentially is a mortise maker, which is the little groove or little hole in the wood that accepts a tenon or a stick or a joint from another piece of wood to go into it to give some strength to the intersection of those two pieces. And so what this is the domino allows you to plunge the hole, but then it comes with some pre-made inserts that go into those holes to allow you to join those pieces of wood quite a bit quicker than the traditional way of doing it. Say if I were to hand cut that joint or hand form that joint, I can do it this way a lot quicker. Well, what we're referring to now is taking that joint but giving it, say, think of your IKEA, your Walmart type hardware. Everybody familiar with those little flimsy pull-out screw twist and
yeah, those little
screws.
locking mechanisms.
This This is a much higher engineered version of that system without all the play and the ability to pull out. It's a really neat thing that allows for versatility and some custom-made stuff to have that same knockdown ability that you get out of some of your cheaper products or your put it together yourself type things.
So it's a high quality fastener that's hidden away that you can't see.
Yep, essentially.
So, yeah, like I like layman's terms because so I would like to hear okay, I said I was going to get to it. I'm going to skip that question. I'm going to get to the elk hunt last year because I think it turned into being fairly interesting in the weather side of life. So because I told everybody I'd ask you about the elk hunt you and Cherney went on. So what I'd like to know is, number one, what gave you guys the idea to do that? Number two, a little bit of the preparation. So the reason I'm asking David about the preparation, just so you guys know, is it helps you understand David a little bit better. So when I say preparation, I'm not saying packing his bags. I'm saying his physical, mental, physical preparation, everything he did, knowing he's going to go on this hunt that's going to be physically demanding. For hunters out there, this is pretty cool. If you're not a hunter, bear with us. So walk us through that and then kind of give us a good summary of how the hunt went, what you guys had to do.
So we'll start by kind of telling you what our walk-in was like on day one of getting to where we were going. So on day one in Colorado where we started at about 7,000 foot elevation at the bottom of the mountain and worked our way up to about 11,000 foot where we made camp that night, and about 7 mile pack-in over that 3,500, 4,000 foot elevation change. So to back up to how we got to get ready to go on the trip, we'll start in about New Year's of last year. I tore my second ACL in right before New Year's, between Christmas and New Year's. I'd torn the ACL in my left knee about 7 years prior. This was my right knee now. So in about February, decided that I'm going to go on an elk hunt that fall, and we're going to do a complete backpack hunt up into the mountains. So January I had surgery and then spent the next 9 months in a sort of physical rehabilitation on myself, working with a goal in mind of that specific pack-in, where I carried about 65 pounds in my pack on my back up that incline or up that haul. In order to get to that point, I spent hours and hours different exercises. Every day was kind of devoted to that hunt in some way, trying to make sure to put in time to do leg exercises every day, going for certain length runs, doing certain leg workouts, everything with this end goal of that climb. Ultimately, I think on that hunt, at one point I knew these numbers. I wish I would have written them down. We've talked about this since we've come down.
Yep.
I wish we would have done it. I believe hiking through the mountains, we logged 40 miles in 5 days. A couple of those were those long,
over 7,000 feet.
Yeah. Most of that time was probably over 9,000 foot. But we put on a ton of miles. Unfortunately for us, the season started on, trying to think if it was Friday or Saturday morning. Well, on Tuesday of the week that opened up, they got kind of a blizzard condition up in the mountains that we were headed to, with 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts and wind chills in the negative 20 degree range. Pretty cold, and it drove just about everything down off of the mountain. We ran into some other hunters that told us that they'd been scouting the week before, and you could hear bugles up in the areas that we were in. Nobody was finding a whole lot down. Everything had just kind of been driven off of the area. So we'd put in quite a bit of time on e-scouting, a lot more popular way of doing things these days compared to probably what it used to be. We didn't have the opportunity to go out and put boots on the ground.
Real quick. A lot of old guys like me are not going to understand what you mean by e-scouting. So can you kind of give me summarize what the definition of e-scouting is and how you do that?
And that's where I'm going with that is, so in the old days, the only way to actually know a spot was to know somebody that'd been there or be there yourself. And so we didn't have the ability, because both of us have young children and limited vacation days in our normal jobs, so not able to go out and put boots on the ground and climb those trails and look and try and physically find animals. So we spent our time on, specifically we used an app from Onyx, and allowing us to find where public ground was, and then merging that with some of the Google Maps and looking into 3D views and trying to really lay out a path, planning out different trails that we could take or different paths to understand what that elevation was going to be. We knew kind of what the incline was and took that incline based off of that scouting using the maps, topography, and we built that into our fitness regime, where we were even matching treadmill walking to the incline of the trails that we were going to be on. So say we were going to be on a 10% slope, it wasn't that, or a 6% on a lot of the trail. We were making sure to be walking at 8 to 10 or 12, making sure that what we're doing is everything in preparation for that hike that we can, because there's no way you can simulate the altitude from where we're at. We're a lot lower here in Kansas than where we were at at the base of the mountain. But so you have to put in the time to get your legs and everything physically in the shape that you can. And e-scouting, we're looking at electronic versions of mapping softwares, was the way that we were able to kind of lay out a plan for what we were going to do when we got there, where we were going to look, and then also how to prepare to get there. Because it's one thing to have this grand idea that you're going to go up and shoot something, but it's another to realize on that same trip, had we been successful, that was a 7-mile walk into the place where we had our camp that first night at 11,000 feet. If we would have shot an elk on opening morning, an elk quarter, you're probably going to add 75 to 100 pounds onto your back. Then you get to take that trip down and back up and down again a couple of times. So your trip doesn't end just because you made it to the top of the mountain. That you need to still have plenty in the tank to continue going from there on out.
Okay, everybody. We had some technical difficulties, had to replace a couple batteries and some cameras. And apparently we needed a little more chicken cock right here. I'm going to tell you this, chicken cock is a whole lot better than holding station, but chicken cock warm is not that good. So always put your chicken cock in the freezer on ice. Chicken cock on ice. Remember that. Sorry, I had to. So, after our technical difficulties, we were talking to David right before that about the conditioning to go up to hunt elk in Colorado at 11,000, 9,000, 7,000 feet. And after you harvest the animal, you're only halfway there. Not even you were just starting the true work of packing the animal carcass out and the weight of that animal carcass. And so what I find interesting is you guys are able to use today's technology to understand the elevation, understand the incline that you guys have to exercise at, and then be able to condition yourselves, even after an ACL tear, to be able to condition yourselves to make it through that. So,
yeah, I think that anybody that knows me knows I'm a fairly self-motivated person, and something that I love is a challenge. So setting that challenge up for myself ahead of time, I mean, obviously that was part of the goal in going. Number 2 is elk is that animal right now for me. Maybe when I get one, it'll be a little bit different. But for right now, elk is that's what I want to get. And I don't want to just go pay somebody $7,000 to go shoot an elk or take me out. I want that experience. That experience was what we were really after. Unfortunately,
weather
where we
didn't
were
work
going
out.
was with when we hit the technical difficulties was we ran into some weather. The Tuesday before we headed up there, we had some pretty adverse conditions, drove everything down off the mountain. So we spent a lot of time that we lost just hiking around, looking around, looking through the snow. Eventually decided that we couldn't really get onto anything up at the top of the mountain and had to come back down and create game plan number 2, which turned into a lot more foot time and just spending time hiking around trying to get into places where there was a chance and spending time behind the glass. Ultimately, we weren't successful this year, but no less determined to go back out and take that opportunity again. This time, the next time we go, will most likely be with a bow instead of a rifle. Even though we weren't successful, I think the next time we're probably going to be taking the bows out for that adventure. One thing about us is we like that challenge. This weekend, we're actually going to be taking the bows out to turkey hunt.
Oh, there you go.
We're
So I'm gonna ask a couple questions that I think people would probably be curious about. So, how hard is it to get, let's say, a rifle tag in Colorado first?
It depends on where you want to go. So that's the first
Where you guys were at.
Where we're at, it's not all that hard. So if you put in for the draw, you can get it. If you're familiar with the system and how it works in Colorado, it's a draw based off preference points system.
Yep.
We put in for a preference point as a first choice, and then as a second choice in the primary draw, we put in for this unit as a first season rifle tag. There's about 50% odds that you're going to get drawn. So in this unit, it's decent chance that we were going to get a tag in that season. I think it's a little bit higher odds reported this year if go in and do that hunt. But that was what we were for last year. Ended up being able to draw a tag. It's about a 20% success rate unit based off of the research that we did. Last year, at the end of the year, I looked into the success rate numbers after harvest surveys. I believe it was about 10%. So that weather on that season didn't just affect us. It affected most people on that particular hunt.
But the good thing about that is this year might be better.
Correct. Historically, it's a 20%. So historically, your odds are twice what they were last year.
And there weren't as many elk harvested, so there should be theoretically more elk there. My next question is, since you guys are going to archery, is it easier to get an archery tag or harder to get an archery tag?
So I guess getting back to where I was headed with that before is
in the area you're wanting to go next.
In the area where we're going, it's going to be probably a little bit easier. So archery tags in a lot of places are pretty well over the counter, so you can get there. Now, if you get into a big trophy potential unit, that's where you're going to have preference points and actually be able to go through a draw. This is more of a general land unit, so it's not all that difficult to get in there. If somebody's willing to go put in the work to try with their bow. I think the Colorado Department of Wildlife and Parks says, yeah, all the power to you. Go ahead, head up the mountain. Best of luck to you.
Yeah, best of luck to you. Don't get eaten.
Yeah, we'll take your tag money right now before you head up there, and and they take their chances.
Oh yeah, here's a life alert. Hit the button if a bear eats you. I'm just having fun. So when do you guys think you're going to go again?
So I think that this year we're probably going to take the year off. I say probably. I haven't talked myself out of it yet. Working on trying to get maybe somebody else to go. I don't think he's going to be able to go with me this year. So my wife isn't exactly thrilled with the idea of me going by myself.
No.
So, I mean, it is a physically demanding hunt. It takes a lot out of a person. You have to be prepared for it, and there's a lot that can go wrong if you're prepared.
Yeah.
It's not something to take lightly, especially not without preparation. So don't want to make light of it. We put in a lot of work, and we're able to get through it, but there's a lot of opportunity, especially when you're walking around with 60-plus pounds on your back carrying everything that you have for something to go wrong.
Yeah.
So being up there by yourself, it's not something to just scoff at.
Yeah, and the other thing about that is it wouldn't take much in the mountains to break your ankle.
No, absolutely not. And that's kind of where I'm going with having that weight on your back. I mean, especially on inclines, walking up trails like that, and you're not on big places, and a lot of those places, taking a wrong step or having your weight thrown off of you is something that's pretty easy to happen.
Pretty easy.
Even if you're paying attention, a limb breaks or something that you were standing unsure-footed, something you can't control. Those things happen to the most experienced hunters out there. Rock slides happen, trees. You never know.
I've got a buddy that does sheep hunts in Alaska, and he guides sheep hunts in Alaska. And there was a guy. My memory of this is a little fuzzy because they were telling me the story during after a long day of hunting. They were at the lodge at CQ Game Birds, and they were telling us the story about this. And so it's a pretty active evening, food, beverage. And so they were sharing this story about this guy that had been guiding sheep hunts for his entire life. He got out on the mountain, got a little too comfortable, slipped off the mountain, and died. He'd been doing it his entire life. He was in his mid-40s, and a rock just slipped just right, and he went off the mountain.
One of the sayings that I've heard that I think is very true and you don't want to forget is the mountain don't care.
Amen.
The mountain doesn't care that I had an ACL surgery or that I'm on a rehab. The mountain doesn't care that maybe you've had a tough day at work, or the mountain doesn't care. You have to leave all of that behind, and you go up in there to tackle the obstacle that's in front of you at that time and to react accordingly.
Yes. And so let's take that philosophy that you just shared here. I think that is a good philosophy for a lot of entrepreneurs to look at. So that employee that you've hired doesn't really. I'm going to be careful how I say this, but I think entrepreneurs will understand it. An employee doesn't care as much as you care about your business. Your buddy doesn't care as much as you do about your business. Your friends might think, hey, great, you're successful, but they don't really care how much time, or they don't understand how much time you have to put in to be successful. And the world does not care about where you're at. It's always, you have to always keep your eye open. You have to drive to be successful. You have to stay focused on the goal. And if you're not focused on the goal as an entrepreneur, you're not going to make it. And you can't worry about what everybody else thinks.
And you have to be ready to react.
Yes.
That's the next part of the mountain don't care, is the mountain's going to continue to throw something at you. It might be that next incline. It might be that you just heard the bugle over the hill, but it's the snow's pouring down, or you just spent 3 hours hiking up on a herd of elk, and then the wind changes direction. Your thermals are now wrong, and it takes your scent right to them and blows them out. The mountain doesn't care that you did that. It's up to you to react and pay attention to it. The mountain is what it is.
Yep.
Just like for your entrepreneur, the conditions are going to be what they're going to be. Was it fair that COVID-19 hit for a lot of people? Absolutely not. But you know what? It happened. And we've got to react to it.
Yep. And that is extremely well put. That through our lives, even whether you're an entrepreneur, engineer, a blue-collar worker, a guy flipping burgers at Walmart, or not Walmart, McDonald's, or a guy at Walmart running a cashier, the world's going to continue to change, and it is up to you to determine your direction that you're going to go. And I'm going to go back to my original thought process or statement that I heard before, that the good Lord made you into a given seed and he put you somewhere. It's up to you whether you're going to stay in this contained pot or you're going to actually grow to the potential he was giving you to grow.
You know something about that analogy that you're putting out there is something that a lot of people really struggle with, is when you take that plant out of that pot, that plant was thriving in that pot. That plant was full, it was green, it was lush, and that plant's going to struggle.
Yep.
When you put it in the ground, it's going to struggle. And not all the plants are going to continue to grow once they get put into that next environment. But if you do, that's when you really flourish and get to see what your true potential is.
Yes, and that goes back to my other friend's statement, Frank Sell, do it scared until you do it good. And I guarantee you, when you're doing it scared, you're going to feel like you're withered. You're going to feel like you're not going to make it. And you just keep pushing through. And I truly believe, because I've lived through some pretty rough stuff in life, that if you keep pushing and you keep driving, you can achieve anything that you're willing to do the work to achieve. I'm not going to tell you can achieve anything. I'm going to say you're going to achieve anything you're willing to put the work out to achieve. So we're running on the 2-hour mark right now, and David and I both have to do our 9 to 5 tomorrow. So, David, I really greatly appreciate you coming out and talking to us. It's been a great podcast. I've enjoyed it. I would like to have you come out again, but before we leave, we have not touched on your business very clearly yet. And so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a moment, think about what you share before you share it. Email addresses are awesome. I would stay away from phone numbers. But it's up to you. It's your business. Go ahead and share how people can get a hold of you, what you offer through your business, and anything else you feel is necessary for them to know real quick before I give my closing statements.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me out. It has been a lot of fun being out here. The ribs that your wife made were excellent, and I always look forward to having those.
Oh, yeah, they're good. Jessica's hands down rub, by the way.
So I think, as we've talked about a little bit, my business involves firearm sales and custom woodworking. If you're looking for something along a custom woodworking route or want me to take a look at something, please feel free to reach out to me at dabecker2@yahoo.com and let me know what you're thinking. I'd be happy to get back with you and give you some sort of an idea on what I can put together for you, or tell you if that's something that's feasible, or help you understand what it is that you're looking for. And then on the FFL side, I do have the ability to find stuff on some of my wholesalers. We are still in a period of time where not everything is available everywhere yet. So if you're looking for something in a firearm accessory, a camping accessory, something like that, an optic, please reach out to me, beckershobbies@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to take a look into trying to find something for you, or if you happen to find that item because I can't get it out there, there's different sites where you can find things available, like a gun broker or guns.com, and I do have my FFL on file with some of those companies, and if you're finding it and able to purchase it on those, I can help you with the transfer if you happen to be in the Newton area.
So what would the transfer fee be?
Yep. So I do transfers for $25 a transfer. And so whatever your price that you've worked out for the gun on whatever site, it'd just be a $25 fee to pick up the gun from me, or to have me work on receiving the gun in from them and helping out with the shipping and handling of that.
And doing all the paperwork, yep, and contacting the government on the paperwork and all that stuff. So, because you're a very articulate person, you speak quite fast. So do me a favor. You gave 2 email addresses, and you gave them like you're an auctioneer. Do me a favor, slow that down quite a bit. That way everybody has the opportunity to send you an email.
Yep. So the 2 emails that you're referring to are dabecker2@yahoo.com or beckershobbies@gmail.com.
Okay. So they can reach you at either one of those emails for FFL opportunities or woodworking opportunities, correct?
Yep. Either one of those 2 will get you in touch with me, and I'd be happy to reach back out to you. Just give me some brief information in the email about what it is that you're looking for, on which thing it is you'd like me to help you out with, and give me some contact information so I can get back in touch with you.
The other thing is if for some reason the podcast doesn't come through real clear and you can't quite hear what he's saying, you always can comment on the podcast, and I can send you those email addresses as well. I think he said them clear enough, but you never know, right? Just in case, if you need to, you can comment on the podcast. We can get you in contact with David. That is Becker's Expensive Hobbies. Fantastic woodworking, offers FFL opportunities as well. Keep in mind, an FFL opportunity is not limited to solely firearms. Understand he can get you camping equipment, scopes, optics, rangefinders, pretty much anything you might want in the hunting and outdoor department, I believe he can get through his business. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, I can get a pretty wide variety of things. So keep in mind, I might not necessarily be able to have all of the brands that you're looking at some of the big box stores, because let's face it, I'm small compared to them. I'm one person operating out of a shop. You can get a hold of what you can get a hold of. A lot of your places like Cabela's are dealing directly with manufacturers and having deals. I deal with wholesalers, so I'm going to be able to get what they're able to provide. So if you're looking for something, let me know. I'd be happy to tell you if it's something that I'm able to receive or if it's something that I just can't get.
And that brings me to my closing statements tonight. Everybody remember, most importantly, buy American. Buy American made. Focus on American products. By buying American made products, we increase our revenue as a country, and we continue to be strong. Always remember to buy local. Support your local businesses. And by supporting your local businesses, you're helping. Perfect example, David put his son through baseball, basketball, soccer practice, whatever, his daughter through dance, soccer, baseball, whatever she's into, helping the kids in America stay strong and continue to grow strong, and help out your local communities, because your local small business is what supports your local community. Your Walmart, your Target, your big box stores, your Amazons definitely do not support your local community. And when things go awry in your local community, your local businesses are the ones that step up and take it in hand and take care of those opportunities. So, excuse me. So, as I always end, please shop this way. You're going to strengthen America through this process, and you'll also ensure that young people in America have a fantastic livelihood instead of just making a CEO have fatter pockets. So again, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time. David, thank you very much for your time. We will have you back on. This was a very engaging podcast. I learned a lot. And also, if you're interested in any of the products through Rub Me Down Barbecue, make sure you check us out. Rub Me Down Barbecue, LLC, Spotify.com, and see what the products are out there. And if you're looking for a fantastic hunting opportunity in central Kansas, come check us out at CQ Game Birds. We're on Facebook. Go look at that. Send me a message, and we can set you up a fantastic hunting opportunity here in Kansas.
Before you get too far, I think you want to redo your website for the Rub Me Down Barbecue. I believe you meant Shopify.
Yes, I did. I did mean Shopify. Did I say Spotify? Shopify. Thank you, David. So that is Rub Me Down Barbecue, LLC, at Shopify.com. Thank you, David, very much. We're going to cut you off now. One more shout out, David. One more shout out. One more. Come on, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening in. I'm David Becker with Becker's Expensive Hobbies, and really appreciated the time to talk with you.
One more giggle. Remember, chicken cock. So, have a good one. Enjoy your evening. I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Please like the podcast, share the podcast if you guys enjoy what we do, and go through and listen to the other ones. Have a good evening. Bye.